Good evening, everyone. We'll just make sure everybody gets in from the waiting room before we start. You'll notice in the chat tonight that there is a link. So if you want to receive your certificate for finishing this workshop, for being here tonight, there is a link in there that you can click on. Just put your information into it and we will send you a certification probably within the next 24 hours. All right, well, welcome. I am glad that you are joining us for another one of our childcare learning labs. For those of you who maybe haven't been to one of these in the past or haven't been to another one of the workshops that we've hosted, my name is Crystal Churcher. I myself am a childcare operator. I also am the chair for an association of childcare operators across Canada. Very happy to take any questions you might have tonight, so please feel free to use the chat. We'll also make sure that there is time at the end too for questions as well, or comments, or just to talk through scenarios if there's something that you want some support with. But tonight's learning lab is really happening for free and for all of you in partnership with ChildFriendly, who is a wonderful supporter of professional development across our industry. If you are not familiar with them, I would encourage you to take a look at ChildFriendly as a software management option for your childcare centers and your programs. Wonderful resources, a lot of free planning tools and curriculum things for you as educators as well. So we'll get right into it. Tonight's learning lab is called Water, Weather, and Wonder, all about water play tonight. And whether you're joining us from a childcare center, preschool, family day home, out of school care program, I'm sure that you have incorporated water at some point into your centers. And when most of us think about water play, we picture children, splashing on a hot summer day. And it's absolutely, something that is fun for children. But tonight I want to challenge you just to kind of think about it a little bit differently. Water is really actually one of the richest learning materials we can offer children. It encourages curiosity, scientific thinking, language, problem solving, fine motor development. And really one thing that I think is often missed with water play is what it can do for self-regulation. If you've ever noticed that when a child is overwhelmed, if you're a parent and you have a child at home and you put them into the bathtub kind of thing, or they're frustrated at your center, having a difficult morning, having a water table can be, altering for the whole mood of your program. They can really help to support that child. Watching how they're playing with the water, scooping, pouring, moving, everything to do with it will help to regulate and calm in that moment. It's absolutely not a coincidence. Those repetitive motions involving that water play provide calming sensory input and help many child to regulate those emotions and organize their thinking. It's one of the reasons occupational therapists often will use sensory experiences like water to support self-regulation and attention. So sometimes the purpose of water play really isn't about teaching children about water. It's about helping them become ready to learn, to become regulated enough to learn, and calm and curious and engaged. So hopefully we'll leave you with that. Our learning labs are all about practical ideas that you can use tomorrow morning in your center. We always want to keep it not only practical, but with things that we can give you that you often will have in your centers. Not looking for you to go out and spend a ton of money on extra resources. Really want to make sure these are very simple, practical activities. This isn't about sitting through an hour of theory. It's about leaving you with ideas that you can actually use. Everything we explore today will fit into one of three invitations: explore, create, or build. There are three different ways that children learn, and each one of these learning labs are structured the same way. Today's session, I'll show you how to adapt each of these invitations for different age groups, and most importantly, how to help you recognize the learning that is actually happening underneath this play, because that's really where your role as educators becomes so important. The activity is simply the invitation. The learning will happen through the conversations, the discoveries, the problem solving, and the observations that you're making while the children are engaged. So why is hands-on exploration so powerful? We always kind of start with this before we get into the activities. Children don't learn best by watching. They learn by doing, I'm sure, like most of us. Um, they, think about learning to ride a bike. I could spend an hour explaining balance and steering and braking, or I could just hand you the bike, and which one would actually teach you how to do it. Children are exactly the same way. They need those opportunities to touch, to experience, experiment, test ideas, make mistakes, and try again. Water naturally creates those opportunities. When children pour water between containers, they're strengthening those fine motor muscles. When they watch ice melt, they're developing scientific thinking. When they negotiate over the funnel, they're learning communication and problem solving skills. When they repeat an experiment over and over, they're building that persistence. So one really simple invitation can have dozens of learning opportunities. One thing I'd encourage you to kind of stop saying or stop having in your mind when you're going through these motions of planning your activities, is to say things or communicate your activities, like with water play, by saying to parents, we had water play today. Try saying things like, today children investigated how water moved through different materials, or today the children predicted, tested, and solved problems while exploring with water. There is such a difference, and it will give you so much more value for the services and the learning that you're providing. Same activity, but different understanding. So with each of the activities tonight, how we break it down, we'll make sure that we leave you with some language to really build and support that communication around the activity. If you could have yourself muted just for background, that would be great. Thank you. So today's learning lab is built around these three invitations. We have explore with our weather investigation tonight. Our create is a water and weather art activity, and then the build is a waterworks challenge. If you think of them as three different lenses, explore will encourage children to investigate, observe, and ask questions. Create encourages children to express ideas and experiment with materials. And build will encourage children to solve problems, test ideas, and really think like engineers. Children won't move through these in perfect order. They'll naturally move back and forth between them. And that's exactly what we want, because real learning isn't linear. It's driven by curiosity. So we're going to start with our first invitation tonight, explore. So children are born curious. I mean, I'm sure you know that working with children. Nobody teaches a toddler to ask why. They're just natural scientists. And our role is to create that curiosity and to protect it. Sometimes we're too quick to answer children's questions. Instead of immediately explaining why something happens, try asking, what do you think? Or let's try finding out together. Those simple shifts in language and ownership will change how the child is learning. It will put it back on the child. So today's investigation is really designed around that inquiry. We're not talking about, Pinterest-worthy photo ops with these activities or memorizing facts. It's all about predictions and testing ideas, observing, and, really thinking like scientists would. So to start this one off, we'll always kind of start with how we set it up, the educator setup for this. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we often make is offering too much, too many materials, too many instructions, too many expectations. Children don't need 20 different tools. They need a few interesting materials and the freedom to really explore that. So we always want to kind of keep it simple, start with the basics. You can add more. Some of the things you can think about here is offering some funnels, clear containers, measuring cups, sponges, natural materials that you have, few objects that float, few objects that sink, really keeping it simple, using things that you already have around your center. Most of us will have these kind of basic materials around in our centers. When you're setting up your environment with water, I mean, it's beautiful outside right now. If this is an outside space that you can access for this, absolutely. I mean, inside, just keep it safe. So make sure that you have, towels and things around so that no one's slipping and falling, and just be aware of that hazard around the water. So adding like those investigation materials and then the language around that. So really making sure that you're inviting that curiosity. Some of the phrases we have up here, I wonder what will happen. What did you notice? Let's do this together. And then stepping back and really making sure that you're giving children that space to explore, that freedom to really investigate and do the activity without too much hands-on and interference into their learning. So for the first age group tonight for Explore, we have our 12 to 18-month-olds. At this age, exploration is entirely sensory. Children aren't learning about the weather. They're learning about the world through their senses. So step one, we want to use some shallow containers. You could have, a variety of different kind of things available to you, whether you have like tough trays or small water tables or just simple plastic containers that are available to you. Offer one or two simple materials, a sponge, a floating toy, a small cup. Less is really more at this age group. And then join the child, sit beside them, be part of it, and really help to narrate what they're doing, add that vocabulary in. So we're focusing here on sensory exploration, cause and effect, observation, some early language and fine motor. Some of the language you could introduce through this activity, we have some words on the slide here like cold and wet and splash and look. Narrating through saying things like you're splashing, the sponge is wet, the water is cold, those kind of things. That simple language will really build the vocabulary while still keeping them engaged. Allow for repetition. If a child is squeezing a sponge over and over again, let them. Repetition strengthens their fine motor skills, attention, really builds that cause and effect understanding. And then, rather than focusing on the activity itself, really watch for the learning. Can the child reach towards the water? Do they repeat an action? Are they noticing the changes? Do they smile when something unexpected happens? Those observations will become your meaningful documentation. Instead of, again, when you're communicating this with parents at the end of the day for their updates, instead of saying things like we played with water, having something here where it's more intricate, it adds the actual value in the learning that's happening. You could say, the child, whoever it is, repeatedly squeezed a sponge, watching the water drip into the container below. She smiled each time, demonstrated curiosity, persistence, and emerging understanding of cause and effect, really being intentional with your observations. For our next age group, we're moving into the toddler years, into our 19 to 36-month-olds. Something really exciting happens at this age. Our children are moving beyond that simple exploring with their senses, and they will start to ask, what happens if? And that's really where the inquiry kind of begins here. So toddlers are in that, what happens if stage? What happens if I pour faster? What happens if I use a bigger cup? When you're setting this up, you can fill the water table or sensory bins with a few more materials. You might want to include things like funnels or measuring cups, clear containers, even some ice cubes or ice, ice balls, whatever you have around. We often freeze different containers in my center for different shapes and that kind of thing. Spray bottles, droppers, those kind of things. You can be, as creative as you want here. The key is really to keep it open-ended so that the children can really decide how they're going to use the materials. We're focusing our development here around kind of that scientific investigation, so prediction, observation, again, building up the vocabulary, some problem solving, scientific inquiry. They're going to, you could ask some simple questions to really incorporate the language here. What do you think will happen? Which one will float? Which one will sink? Do you think the ice will stay the same? Just remember, you're not looking for the right answer. You're just encouraging that thinking, building on the vocabulary. And really here, give the children time. Resist the urge to explain every observation. Instead, just say, let's see what happens. Kind of giving them that space and time to really explore and investigate with this, and let them begin testing those ideas rather than being given the answers right away. You can start to look at extending conversations here. So, asking questions around what's changing, what do you think will happen next, what should we try next? That's building that cycle of wondering and testing and observing and then trying it again. So looking for, curiosity, prediction, problem solving, persistence, and communication here. And then we're going to move into the preschool years, our 3 to 4-year-olds, the same kind of activity. As children move into those preschool years, you'll see that they're shifting. They're no longer kind of simply asking what will happen. They're going to start to ask why and really want to explore those reasons behind things. Preschoolers love feeling like real scientists, so you can give things here like magnifying glasses, maybe even a clipboard with some investigating questions, or depends on the kids you have, and really build up that engagement. You can add things like a weather chart. Maybe you're adding different ice or different things that are floating and sinking, boats, those kind of things. You're really focused here around that scientific inquiry, recording those observations, critical thinking, prediction, communication. Instead of having this set up as kind of a simple water play activity, you could really focus it more around being an investigation station. And that's having those kind of scientific components to it, like the weather charts. We've seen like rain gauges, and you could have some real pictures of weather, whatever you have available to you. Having that melting ice or puddles or different things to talk about weather would be perfect for kind of this type of activity too. You're building on, again, like that scientific investigation and prediction part of development here. Some of the language that you could really incorporate is more about encouraging their observations than giving information. So what do you notice? What has changed? What do you think will happen? Sometimes the most powerful teaching will happen after a few seconds of silence. So when you ask those questions, give them the time and space to think about it, to really process and try and figure out what's happening. Go. So again, looking for that curiosity, you're going to talk to parents around all of the predictions, their observations, the scientific thinking that's happening here. We're going to kind of jump right from here into our next section, which is the create side of things. We just spent the time going through kind of the exploring investigation side using kind of simple water activities and water play. And our second invitation is really because we believe, before the children can actually observe the world, they need to be able to express what they've discovered. And that's what the create portion of these seminars are. So when we hear the word art, we often think of the finished project. These are not art-based activities. These are all about open-ended creation based around water, again, for tonight. So when we're setting this up and you're preparing your materials, again, making sure that it's a safe space, there's enough room. You can incorporate a little bit of like mess and spillage here without adding hazard to your areas for your children. Having some basic kind of art supplies available to you. If you're doing this outside, especially on a hot day, you could have, spray bottles and chalk and those kind of things. We've incorporated like colored ice cubes and colored ice, portions of frozen things. Large paper, paint brushes, any kind of natural materials that work. You don't need to have a ton of things to really make this an engaging activity. Make sure you're offering that kind of open-endedness rather than demonstrating a finished product. Invite them to explore and to build. Saying things like, I wonder what we could create with these materials today, instead of today we're going to be making a rainbow. One statement will give them direction, the other will invite that imagination, which is exactly what we're aiming for with this. If you're talking to a parent about this kind of activity at the end of the day, and they ask, what did they make today? You could tell them about the learning that's happening. So today your child was experimenting with color mixing, strengthening fine motor skills, using spray bottles, and explored how water really changes through different materials. You're giving the parent all of this understanding, and really the purpose behind the play. You're adding value to the services that you're offering, and really being seen as the professional that you are here in the industry. So for the first one, what we're going to talk about for our 12 to month olds, I mean, art is really simplified exploration at this age. The children are not trying to paint pictures. They're discovering movements, they're discovering texture, color, that cause and effect. So you want to start by, preparing the invitation. So if you're using paper, make sure, it's outside. It could be on a fence, it could be on the ground. You could offer things like large paintbrushes, just basic water, colored ice, water on concrete works really well even. Keep it super simple. You want to maybe model it once, so show the children how the brush moves across the paper, then step back. The goal isn't about copying, or it's all about exploration at this point. Developmentally, we're focusing on those arm movements, the sensory exploration, cause and effect, early coordination. And some of the language you can incorporate here is just really simple. Things like you're making long lines, look, the ice is melting, the paper is getting wet, really narrating to build that vocabulary without interrupting the play. Start watching with your observations for their arm movement, their grip development, their visual tracking, the repetition that's happening. Remember that repetition isn't boredom, it's learning. This is how we're learning at this age. And as we move on to the toddlers, remembering that as children become toddlers, their creativity becomes much more intentional. Now they're making choices with their art. Toddlers love discovering what materials can do. So especially, if you can bring in materials that will surprise them a little bit, spray bottles are a really good one at this age. That colored ice, watercolor paint, every material really becomes an opportunity for them to experiment. So when you're setting this up, you want to lay out the materials. Don't explain it all. Simply ask, I wonder what you might discover today. I wonder what these things might do, those kind of things. You're leaving it open for them to discover. Developmental focus here, we're looking around the creativity, building those fine motor skills, color exploration, coordination, cause and effect. Color mixing is a really great thing you can incorporate with this activity too. So, it can be as elaborate or simple as you want. Incorporating some of those language, kind of building the questions up here. Tell me about your artwork. What is it? Tell me, how did you make this? How did you make this color? That kind of thing. What has happened? What happens when you spray? What happens when the colors mix? So really inviting that planning, the language, the reflection. Those conversations are so much more valuable than the actual artwork themselves. You can offer, really open-ended materials here again. So watercolor paint, add some salt in with it, or some colored ice to really extend those activities. And it can, again, as simple or as complex as you want to make this, incorporating things you likely already have around your center. For our 3 to 4 year olds, you're really going to be able to focus on, like I said, a little bit more complex art here. You could really have some pictures of, if we're looking at weather inspired artwork, maybe you have some pictures of different weather that they can kind of have available to them, to kind of demonstrate or show, give ideas, some inspiration. If it's been raining outside for weeks, like it was across the province not long ago, maybe outside you're planning kind of what they're going to do based on the puddles and the different things that we've been seeing around, maybe around your outside space or any of those kind of things. So you can incorporate, like, again, a little bit more complex things. Maybe you're bringing out different materials, smaller brushes, different kinds of paint, adding some salt in with the watercolor paint or those kind of things. You're focusing here around their planning, how they're setting themselves up, what their intentions are behind what they're creating. artistic expression, representation, the fine motor skills, the creativity, maybe even some of the problem solving and different things that come out of trying to build up whatever the vision is that they had in their head when they started with the project. And then building that language. So asking those questions like, what weather are you creating? What would you like to add? Tell me about your artwork. It's really endless, how you could get them going and talking about what they're building to give you that kind of feedback and insight into what they're trying to create. Next section of our invitations is the build section. So with this one, we've already covered kind of the exploration side, the creation side. The building is really where the children get to become engineers. So we're moving from scientists to engineers tonight. And when I say engineering, I'm not picturing hard hats and bridges or complicated machinery. We're talking about those simple solving, problem solving skills through design, things that they're doing naturally every single day when they're building towers, when they're creating forts, obstacle courses. Those kind of things are all focused around this kind of build framework. All right, so when we're setting this up, when you're setting up kind of an engineering invitation, think less about, sorry, can you just mute yourself, please? I'm sorry, the background noise is really loud right now. When you're setting this up, think less about creating the perfect water course here, and more about creating possibilities. So we're setting up tonight kind of a water challenge. You could be setting this up to look differently depending on your space and what you have available to you. Having, a defined space. So if it's indoors, make sure it's again safe and big enough to do the whole activity and allow for that room for movement. Make sure the surfaces are protected and safe from slipping, those kind of things. If you're having this outside, you may have, a whole bunch more space and availability to move around. You can include materials here. I've seen some really elaborate things with PVC pipes and funnels and flexible tubing, buckets, water tables, blocks, everything that is kind of incorporated into this. It doesn't need to be expensive equipment. Some of the most kind of creative activities happen with materials that you have around the center with recycled materials. So just making sure that you do leave enough space, because this kind of activity can be messy. And they need that space to be able to test their ideas and move materials and collaborate. So we're going to be encouraging children to really investigate how water moves. So how can we move water? Where should it go? What could we build? I was at a center recently where they did literally a bucket and cup kind of challenge. So they had 2 buckets full of water at opposite ends of kind of their play space, and the children had to take a cup and travel and fill up one bucket from the other. And this kept going for hours. They were so engaged with this. And it was such a great activity. So super simple. It can look so different, however, works for your space and what you have available to you, and how you want to set it up too. So the whole point here when you're observing is really to step back, observe how they're collaborating, how they're working together, how they're working, maybe to build a certain vision that they had, and how they're persevering when it doesn't work the first time. Are they coming back? How does it look different? So again, however complicated or simple you want to make this, for our 12 to 18-month-olds, you're really setting this up just to keep it very simple. Engineering at this age is all just about discovering that their actions make something happen, which is a really important realization. So you could start by offering a shallow water table or sensory bin. You could have, different cups to pour from one to the other, just to see how the water is moving, maybe from one bucket to the other. Maybe you have funnels or short tubes. Again, just keep it very simple, just 1 or 2 materials. Do a demonstration so that the children can see, how maybe the water moves through the funnel, and then let them explore, remembering that the goal isn't about teaching them, it's all about letting them have that freedom to discover. We're looking for kind of our developmental focus around cause and effect, exploration, coordination, sensory play, fine motor development.
دفنقي
Sorry, there we go.
الله حمار المرأة هذه سبحان الله، يعني هذا زمان ندين تو هذا يعطوه لحد.
Sorry. So yeah, you're wanting to incorporate simple language here. You know, you poured the water, look where it went. It's coming out over here. Those kind of things. Simple, you know, pour, watch again. Where did it go? You made it move. All really basic vocabulary that will help to kind of incorporate and have the new language kind of coming up as they're growing. If you're going to do some documentation around this, and a great example would be along the lines of Lucas repeatedly poured water through a funnel today, watching it flow into the container below. He adjusted where he poured the water and repeated the activity several times, demonstrating curiosity, coordination, and an emerging understanding of cause and effect. Way beyond we played with water today. So just really making sure that you're incorporating all the learning that is happening in your observations and communication with families around these activities. They're super simple, but there's, again, so much that is happening just through these basic activities. So for our toddlers, as they're growing into this age group, the 19 to kind of 36-month-olds, they really stop simply just watching the water. They're beginning to try to control it. They love making changes at this age, higher, lower, faster, slower. They really begin to realize that they can influence what's happening. And that's really where the engineering kind of thinking starts to develop. You could incorporate some more kind of loose parts into the activity here. So maybe you're bringing in different, like some blocks or different things that will float, sponges. Maybe you're incorporating longer tubes or different funnels or those kind of things, buckets, and really inviting them to kind of connect the pieces however they'd like. So your focus for developmental learning here is all around the problem solving. So maybe there is a challenge to, again, get the water from over here to here or through here to here. However you want to make it look. I've seen really incredible water walls set up outside too, with, you know, some basic PVC pipes and funnels and different things. So there's lots of different ways you could set something like this up. Bringing in the language here about, you know, what they think will happen. How could they make the water go farther? How could they make it go faster? Really adding that prediction in, because it's so important to the scientific thinking at this age. You know, once the children start beginning to experiment, avoid jumping in too quickly. Instead, give them that chance to kind of experiment and explore. Ask prompting questions like, what's changed? What should we try next? And the children, you'll notice, will naturally move to rediscover, redesigning the process to try different things as it's, you know, as they're maybe making it work or it's not working. So again, the goal isn't about building the perfect water course. It's about thinking and planning and trying different things at this age. When we move into the next one for our preschool age children, this is really where engineering becomes incredibly exciting. The children can begin creating plans, they can work together, they can explain ideas. You could set this up to really have them working in small teams or working together for a certain goal. You know, maybe you're prompting them to build or move water from a bucket all the way to the other side without carrying it. And how would that look, and what kind of plan could they come up with as a group? You know, building that problem solving, that would be such an easy activity to do on a hot day in your play space. Again, you can add a few more complex materials here, maybe some different connectors, different types of water containers, you know, whatever you have available, again, to be able to play with it safe for them. But again, you're inviting children really to plan those ideas, to simply talk through them. Maybe you sit down as a group and kind of talk about what the goal is and what the challenge would be ahead of time. That's really where the engineering cycle, I think, could come to life with this, is to building it, testing it, observing, and then coming back and adjusting it. and trying again. So what we're looking for here for the developmental focus is really that engineering thinking, the planning, the collaboration, the critical thinking, that scientific inquiry, the perseverance here would be a good one, even the communication between children. When you are really talking, you're trying here just to make sure that you're kind of supporting them in how they're doing this. So asking questions like, how could we improve it, but not telling them, allowing them that freedom to kind of figure it out and try and learn different things, what will work and what won't. What should we test next? How, can you explain your idea? Why do you think that would work? Those kind of things. If, moving water isn't going to work in your area either, a simple like water activity of sinking or floating objects and trying to guess and predict would work really well here too, without having kind of that movement, if that's not going to be an option safely for you, or you just don't have the space. And so with this, I mean, again, it's warm outside right now. There's a lot of different ways you can do this with water play. So you can be as creative as you want to here. So when we go through these activities and these invitations kind of each month with these sessions for you, one of the things that's really important is to really give you some prompts and some language that you can take back when you're doing your observations, because it's so important, I think, to communicate with parents the real learning that is happening here. And a lot of times I feel like we get stuck using this kind of the same language over and over again. And we do spend a lot of activities or a lot of time and energy planning our activities without really kind of thinking sometimes of how much the real learning happens just from when the children are engaged, and with these simple kind of practical activities that you could set up just using things you have around your center. So when you're reflecting on it, maybe asking yourself, did they complete the activity? But what did they learn? Did it work? Did they, how much time were they engaged with this? What could you add to the activity maybe to extend it into the next day if this was something that they were really engaged with? Did you notice their persistence? Did you notice the curiosity, the scientific inquiry? How was leadership kind of brought up through these activities, or their confidence, or problem solving, or planning and sequencing? These kind of words, if you can incorporate them into your observations and kind of watch for them as you're planning these activities and really seeing them come through, will really help you to communicate again with parents the learning that is actually happening when the children are with your care. Asking yourself, like, what did the child do? What skills were they demonstrating? Why does this matter for their development? Those kind of simple questions in that framework can really turn everyday observations into meaningful documentation, meaningful communication. And it's really one of the biggest shifts we can make as educators, moving away from just documenting the activities towards documenting the learning and development that's happening, because the activity will be forgotten, but the learning will stay. And you'll be able to see how that learning is growing kind of with the child and with different activities and things that you're planning to really build on those skills. So, as we wrap up for tonight, I hope I gave you maybe some different perspective if you're thinking about adding some water play into your planning for this week. Today really wasn't about just adding water. It's about really trying to look at everyday play through some different lensing. When children are pouring, they're learning. When they're building, they're learning. When they're experimenting with ice cubes and color mixing, it's all learning. And your role as an educator can feel like you need to be directing each moment of it, but it's really just to create those meaningful invitations, and to ask thoughtful questions and slow down long enough to really notice all the incredible learning that's already taking place through these kind of simple activities. So if I could leave you, I guess, with one thing from tonight, we are already kind of at the end of the week, so I guess we could do it for next week, but just choose one invitation from today's session and try it with your children. So If you are not someone who usually incorporates water, just try it in a simplified, easy way, and see what happens in your center and see how the children respond. And then try and build from there. Maybe you can add a few things to extend it, said from being a simplified activity to something more elaborate outside that involves movement or planning or those kind of things. So, I think that when you start to add these little things, you'll be so surprised at how much learning is actually happening through these simple activities. It will reduce your planning time and sometimes the stress that you're carrying to try and make sure that you're really incorporating all of this learning through sometimes way too elaborate, not age appropriate activities. So I hope I left you with some practical skills from tonight, maybe just a different lensing around using water and all of the things that comes just from those kind of simple activities. Hopefully you're feeling some inspiration and confidence to go out and try some new ideas in your classrooms tomorrow. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them tonight. Before we leave, this certificate link, I know people were asking me, I did place it into the chat. I can put it in again, but it'll be also included in the resource package that you get following this. So like any of our child-friendly kind of lunch and learns or learning labs, we'll follow up with some great resources. This will be broken down. You'll be able to see the activities kind of step by step with the planning and the materials and everything. So it's very easy for you to implement. Yeah, so with that, I'll open it up if there is questions. If not, I hope you guys had a wonderful week so far. I hope that Friday is great for you and you have a beautiful weekend. And we will have our next learning lab in August. So stay tuned. If you've registered, you'll get the link for that one as well. But thank you again for your time, and I hope you have a great night.